What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of How to Build a Game Studio. I am Trevor Oz, and today I am joined by a pair of brothers from Friendly Pixel. I am joined by Daniel Yoder and Christian Yoder. How are you guys today?
Doing all right. Thanks for having us on.
Great. Thanks for having us, Trevor.
It's a pleasure to have you both on. And Daniel, you're the second person I've had on from the future.
Hey, there we go. It's great here. You're gonna love it.
I can't wait to get there. So,
yeah.
So anyway, you guys both seem to be in very different places because Daniel's in Japan right now. Christian, you're in LA.
Yep, that's right.
So yeah, you guys have definitely at some point, obviously you're brothers, you grew up together, so at some point have diverged a bit. So going back all the way back to the beginning, did you guys think that you'd be in video games when you were younger?
No, to be honest, I never really thought I would. It was sort of I enjoyed playing them, obviously, as most people do, but kind of the transition into development is something that is actually quite recent.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I've been in video games for over 5 years now, having come from Riot Games. But even working at Riot, working in video games is not something I saw as a kind of career path or something that somebody, did as a sort of a viable career. But yeah, here we are.
So what kind of stuff did you guys play as kids?
I liked a lot of those sort of old school RPGs like Baldur's Gate, and also I guess a lot of RTSs, Civilizations, Age of Empires. I mean, Civilization isn't an RTS, but that kind of
I know what you mean.
Genre, I guess.
Yeah. As a younger brother, I more or less liked whatever my older siblings bought or pirated and stuff. So a lot of my tastes for video games take from Dan and my older siblings. So yeah, similarly, I've really liked all these sort of older RPGs. As well as like some competitive RTSs. StarCraft is sort of one of the games that sort of stands out in my mind as sort of a formidable experience.
For me too, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. So I was reading your website and I saw the rundown of your profiles. So Daniel, were you actually a StarCraft pro player?
No, that was sort of one. I didn't write that. Two, it was a bit of a it's a bit of a joke. I did sort of play. I'd say more like personally competitively. I was like low tier masters, I believe, is what I finally hit. But like, no, I was not. I was not in any way sort of like pro. It was just something that I spent way too much time doing and probably getting stressed about.
Yeah, I kind of figured. I just wanted to actually ask that question.
No, that's a fair question.
Yeah, it's really funny because I've had friends like that who are just good at certain games. So like within our group, they'll be like the guy where it's like nobody beats him.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's especially like sort of before like online multiplayer or like when that wasn't as big. So much of your like video game prowess was based on like, hey, could you beat your friends in parties in the same room? And so a lot of times that was sort of the bar. And it wasn't until sort of the explosion of online competitive multiplayer games that you realized just how bad you were.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was my friend Tim who was very good at Halo, and then he's still pretty good when we play online. I curse you, Tim. Anyway, anyway, moving forward, at what point do you guys? So you're going through your younger days playing video games and that. Where do you decide to go at this point? What do you both see for your careers as you're moving out of high school into college?
Well, I'll start with that one. So I studied journalism as an undergrad, and didn't. So I graduated in 2010, sort of at the height of the recession, when there weren't exactly a bajillion jobs in journalism. Turned out I didn't even like the field anyway. So going going into that field was not something that I even really pursued much. Worked a little bit as a journalist for a few months, mostly on sort of crappy online publications. And then, yeah, spent frankly the first few years sort of out of college, not really sure what I wanted to do. I spent some time overseas, and it took me a little while to get my feet under me to sort of figure out what kind of career trajectory I wanted um, to go on, and that was when I hit grad school.
Okay, what about you, Daniel?
Yeah, for me, I ended up doing a lot of freelance work actually. Like for the longest time, I was doing basically, I guess, graphic design, into like photography, some videography. I moved to Japan quite a while ago, so as one does when they move to Japan, I also ended up teaching English for a while, and it's part of the initiation. But yeah, definitely sort of, I guess I ended up in fields that were slightly technical. In terms of, I guess, so the graphic design and sort of a little bit of like web development and things like that. But definitely nothing that sort of touched on gaming at any point.
So, what was your Daniel? How did you decide to move? Where did you guys grow up at actually?
So it's pretty complicated, kind of a few different places. Grew up in Japan for a while actually, and the reason I ended up moving back to Japan in my early to mid 20s was my wife is half Japanese, half American, and we were in Europe together, and then we was kind of like we were going to either move to the States or move back to Japan, and she was sort of leaning that way, so we decided to give it a try, and we love it here, so.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about living in Japan.
Yeah, it's really great.
So what about you, Christian? What brought you to Los Angeles area?
Well, it was initially grad school. So like I said, after I graduated from college, I was sort of wandering aimlessly for a couple of years. And then I applied to a bunch of grad schools and went to the one that I got in at, which was the University of California, Santa Barbara. So it's a few hours up the road from Los Angeles along the coast, where I was studying effectively social psychology. And yeah, the industry is got a big presence in LA. But even at that time, I wasn't really thinking about, I really want to go into video games. I was sort of thinking, I probably want to be an academic. I want to do research. I was really very, very into scientific research, but starting something completely irrelevant to what I do now, some altruism in humans and how that evolved. And I had an internship up at Facebook in 2013. And there, I met some people who were playing this game, League of Legends, and they're trying to get me into it. I thought it was kind of stupid, whatever. Then I found myself playing hours pretty much every night, and learned that they were right down the road from where I was going to school. So I sent some people, a few LinkedIn messages. I think at the time, right, it was a lot less competitive place to sort of get into. Got hired there and yeah, spent up to 5 years there before finally closing that chapter of my life and starting Friendly Pixel with Dan.
I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm pretty sure I introduced you to League of Legends. I seem to remember. I don't really. This is not some kind of like an ego thing, but I remember like after playing StarCraft, I used to play it really heavily, and then I think it was around season 3 with League of Legends. I started playing it as a way to, ironically, considering how stressed it ended up making me, as a way to relax.
Yeah.
Because StarCraft, you're just completely, you cannot take your hands off the keyboard kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So League of Legends was sort of a way to kind of actually get some downtime.
Sort of concurrently. I think there was sort of like a confluence of things. I think it's 2 was just becoming very, very popular.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah, because I remember there was at least at the time a League of Legends club at Facebook, and I remember just playing games in a room there. And yeah, so yeah,
good deal.
All right. So Christian, going into Riot, where did you start out at Riot?
So I was doing research in grad school. So Riot hires people in the social sciences to do market research and games user research at the company there. So I was hired in as an associate, which is sorry, an associate researcher. So I was doing things like running a lot of player labs, analyzing a lot of player data, doing a lot of surveys, that sort of thing. When I initially started.
Okay, and is that how? Where did you go from there within the company?
Yeah, so I actually uh, did did a couple things. I was there for a spell. Then I got asked to do some product management work um, for the team that was the what was called the player behavior team. So this is the team that is responsible for sort of perhaps not particularly effectively stomping out toxicity in League of Legends. So that's like there's a lot of toxicity in League of Legends because it's a sort of a very stressful experience with teammates who most of the time you can't rely upon, you don't have like rapport or trust with, and so there's a lot of yelling and name calling, sort of to put it mildly. And so I switched at one point to be the product manager of that team, to work on systems for curbing toxicity within League of Legends. So that was one area I went. I wasn't at that post very long, maybe 8 months or so. And then at a certain point, I was managing the sort of the analytics and research team for the gameplay portion of League of Legends. That's most of what we think of when we think of League of Legends is sort of the gameplay aspects of pretty much things that aren't related to like cosmetics and monetization and stuff like that.
So, what were your biggest takeaways from working for Riot?
Some of my biggest takeaways when working at Riot, I think one of my biggest takeaways, sort of immediate ones when I left Riot, when founding the studio with Dan, was despite the fact that I've worked for 5 years in video games, I really never really learned how to make video games working at Riot. When you work at a studio that is, as Riot is, uh, you unless you're like a game designer or something, most of what you're doing is going to be a sort of a very, very specific thing within the company. And so going through that process of A to Z of like, hey, I have an idea for a game and I want to create it, launch it, market it, and all that sort of stuff. You're going to be sort of doing one very, very sort of specific portion of it. So my experience taught me how to operate within a sort of massive games as a service live operation, right? And sort of all the stuff that goes into that, but not really concretely, like from the ground up, how do you create something that's just sort of an idea in your mind into something tangible?
Okay. So at the time that you're at Riot, Daniel, what are you doing at this point?
For about the past 4 years, I've been working for a marketing software startup here in Fukuoka, Japan. And we received a decent amount of investment initially, so that has been chugging along for a while. And then I left in May of this year. But yeah, basically, I would say the entire time Chris is at Riot more or less coincided with me working for that software startup.
Okay. So at the startup, was there anything from that experience that you learned when starting that you could use for starting up Friendly Pixel?
For sure. I mean, I think for me, like that really kind of gave me the idea to attempt it, and not necessarily because I saw things executed correctly, but but a lot of learning, what not to do in some circumstances. But yeah, just the idea of kind of getting a product out there, and seeing how difficult it can be in the different roadblocks that tend to get put up, oftentimes almost in sort of like a self-sabotaging way, that prevent you from just doing what it is you set out to do. Because one thing I think I've learned is that there's never a good time to release. Like there's always something, right? And that's something that I was really kind of, I think, able to take away from kind of talking to people. I also learned a lot as far as we were all in one room, only about like between 10 and 15 of us, so seeing a lot of different roles, and I was sort of involved in sort of a lot of different aspects, some of the marketing, a little bit of design, a little bit of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, which allowed me to kind of just kind of glean from other people's experiences, and I thought that was quite helpful, actually.
Yeah, I would agree. Learning from others is definitely easy when you're working together, and it's nice to take away those experiences, because at least for me, I'm very inexperienced when it comes to game development. So learning from people like Kent or Moody, who are in my studio right now, who have experience in that, is very nice for me, because I get to sit under the learning tree every once in a while.
Right. Yeah.
So at this point, I'm sure you're both working different companies, different jobs. Obviously communicating with each other because you're brothers. At what point do you guys decide to leave those companies and start your own?
I have a memory in my mind of sort of when it happened. We had been sort of working on this sort of side project. I think at sort of initially as more of a side project, a hobby. Is something that we sort of we had these sort of ideas for party games that we wanted to make. We sort of started working on them during nights and weekends. And then I think at one point, Dan, we had been talking about sort of like doing this full time for a little while. But I don't think that, like, in my mind, I was ever sort of quite serious about it. And then I remember having one distinct conversation with Dan, where, paraphrasing here, is something like, well, I think I'm actually just going to quit what I'm doing and sort of do this thing that we've been doing on the side full time. Do you want to do it with me? And I remember sort of at that moment, like, having, I don't know, it's very easy to sort of get comfortable at a job. When you get to know the people, you get good at it. Working a software job in California can be a very comfortable living, and I started like getting really nervous about it. But then, like, ultimately, I couldn't. I couldn't let Dan go on this adventure sort of without me, because that was also been something that I've always wanted to do myself as well. So I think Dan sort of like dragged me into it, and I'm very glad he had.
It's interesting. I have a slightly different memory of it. Yeah, well, I remember. Well, not that your memory is probably better than mine, but I remember I remember I was saying that I was probably going to do it, and then I remember you saying that if you quit your job to do it, then I'll join you. And I remember being surprised. That's why I remember differently. Because I remember thinking, like, well, you've got this job at Riot. It's a bit more like, for me, I'm not really losing too much. No disrespect, but leaving Riot, on the other hand, it felt like a bigger move. So for me, that just stuck somewhat as a memory as being something that was a little bit like, not concerned about, but just it was something that definitely sort of registered that there was something to give up there.
Sort of like a feedback loop, where it's right. Like, I say I'm going to quit, but I didn't think I was like particularly serious about it. So then you quit, and then you start it, and I'm like, oh shit, this is actually happening. Just sort of it spirals out of control, and here we are.
All right, so early on in the process, did you guys have any reservations about doing it?
Oh, of course. I think starting your own company, there are so many sort of obstacles and barriers and sort of unknowns too that can get in the way of sort of getting off the ground. Um, yeah, I frankly, I personally was pretty nervous about the idea.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sort of once I've taken the plunge, and I remember, so I think the first day or something, like I thought I was going to quit, or I made the decision sort of emotionally or mentally that I was going to quit Riot. I think like that day I was like, very sort of like nervous about it. There was like a lot of questioning about sort of like what am I doing, and then the next day sort of feeling really good about it. So yeah, lots of reservations at first. Very glad that I've taken the plunge.
Yeah, I would sort of share that sentiment. I think it kind of was met on the other side by this what we've been discovering as we sort of from when we started the project was we started not really knowing a thing about, so neither of us were engineers. We like, I don't know, I've like dabbled in some tutorials from time to time sort of thing. And then over the past kind of year and a half, just slowly making progress in getting better at what it is we're doing, and kind of learning that some of these things that I previously thought of as being just completely like out of the realm, like you have to be, I don't know, like an MIT grad to like, know how to do this stuff. It turns out it's relatively simple in many ways. So I think there was also that kind of supported us maybe and made us feel like maybe it wasn't the worst idea after all.
Yeah, and even this day and age, it's kind of even things you don't think are possible. It's there are so many resources out there to where if you're
Right.
trying to figure out how to do something, you can just kind of go on YouTube and figure it out.
Hmm.
Yeah, the barriers to entry are extraordinarily low for a couple of people with with sort of very varied and sort of shallow skill sets, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. In the sense that sort of I think we know all a little bit about a bunch of different things, but we're not particularly specialized in any sort of specific thing.
Hmm.
I think the sort of the world is very open. The barriers to entry for something like games development or software development probably more generally are pretty low, and pretty accessible now.
Hmm.
Yes. So for you guys being a jack of all trades, um, where where did you have challenges early on in the process?
Hmm. I think one thing that has kind of worked for us is a bit
Mm-hmm.
how we've split stuff up. I think Christian is more technically savvy in terms of sort of the engineering side of things, and for me, coming from a design background, um, it's a little bit easy for me to focus on things like creating the game assets and stuff like that. So I think the ability to kind of partition ourselves in this way, just even we're just a two-person team, but
Mm-hmm.
in a way we kind of cover a lot of things. So for me, being able to rely on Chris for the more Christian, sorry, for the more technical things has been really helpful, because otherwise I could definitely see that as being sort of the limiting factor for me.
Yeah, I would say that we haven't really ran into sort of insurmountable barriers. We definitely have to
Mm-hmm.
get creative about certain things, right? Like, I think sort of like given enough time, any one of us, sorry, like either of us can sort of learn any one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But it's probably not a valuable use of time to spend, the next 6 months learning about a sort of very specific piece of tech or something like that, right? And so there are definitely times where we've had to be creative about, okay, well, we're just not going to go that direction. And we're going to have to sort of take a simpler route where it's better documented and where there's sort of more layers of abstraction between, how to sort of implement the idea, um, and sort of like the physical attributes of the idea. Um, but yeah, I think to Dan's point, I think that we've been able to sort of partition the work pretty well. It's sort of so happened that I've taken on more of the engineering work, and Dan's sort of much more of a creative individual than I am. So he's done sort of all the UX and art and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. Pretty much at our studio, we have 5 people and we all each do our own thing, and we're very partitioned off, and I think that works well for us because we all are better at certain things than others.
Yeah.
So you guys formed in what, May? Was it officially?
I think officially in August.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, is that right, Chris?
I want to say, so I quit in July.
Okay.
And so I think it was in July because I remember sort of filing the paperwork around when I was leaving. Filing the sort of incorporation work for the company when I was leaving.
Okay, so you guys have been officially a company for a very short amount of time, and you already have a product out there. Like how?
Well, I guess a couple of things. It's a very, very simple product. It's very much the MVP of what we want to do. I think one of the things that we decided sort of very early on was that we wanted to take an extraordinarily iterative approach to our development, where we were sort of just releasing the product, as sort of we had it, as long as it was playable. The second aspect of that is we had been moonlighting, on sort of nights and weekends while we were at our other jobs during the process, which also made it easier.
Yeah, like there was we started the company in August, released a few months after, but prior to launching the company, we'd been, like Chris said, kind of working weekends here and there, working off and on for about a year actually. But obviously within that year, it wasn't at all like any sort of actual sort of full-on development schedule. It was more just kind of poking around at computers here and there and figuring out how stuff works.
Okay, so you released Treasure Hunt. It's for iOS. Tell us about it.
Do you want to tell them, Christian, or should
I? You go for it.
Okay. Well, Treasure Hunt is basically what we're trying to do is bring board games / party games to mobile. And the mobile part of it is more just incidental, I think. Like everybody has a phone, as Blizzard is fond of telling people. So it's something that we kind of know that more or less people will be able to play without having to jump through too many loopholes. And there seems to be a bit of a missing space there. Like there's Heads Up, for example. There are like one or two others that I can think of for people when they just want to, like, when they're sitting around with a few friends, you all want to play together, but you don't want to like necessarily game.
Yeah.
You're just looking to kind of interact with the people you're with. And so that's what we wanted to do with Treasure Hunt. Initially, it actually came from I think I was playing Codenames at a bar at a board game night, and I was just sort of like playing it, and it was really fun. Everyone was having a great time, and I just kind of thought, even in sort of the limited sort of engineering skill that I had at the time, I was thinking, well, this is something that we could probably make digital. Like it seemed like something that was doable. So kind of started from there, and now it's a thing.
So yeah, you guys wanted to make something social. Something that when you're socializing with your friends, you can just have a good time, and but still have like that social aspect where it's.
Yeah, we wanted to like sort of explore the area of in-person gaming, right? So much of gaming now, right? Even if it's quote unquote social, takes place online,
right?
And we wanted to sort of mediate the to take the sort of fun aspects and social aspects of board gaming, right? The sort of like in-person fun, and use the sort of convenience and design space that opens up when you put things on digital, right? Um, and so where Friendly Pixel is operating is sort of in between those two things, um, trying to merge them together.
Okay. And you guys, you've released it on iOS right now. Um, did you guys have any challenges releasing it on a platform that obviously you guys have never worked on before?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
anytime. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say basically the whole thing was a challenge from start. Like you say, we never worked on it, so basically everything we ran into was just something new, something that we didn't anticipate and had to just figure out how to do it. I remember just even basic things like when you submit to the App Store, you have to submit screenshots of the app, and I remember the screenshots being like 1 pixel off because of the way the Illustrator had exported them, and it was just like Apple couldn't deal with it, kind of thing. Just all these little things that, if I had to do it again, or when we do the next launch, we'll know. But every step along the way was definitely a challenge that we had to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. There was, I don't think that it was uniquely challenging, because, yeah, everything that we were doing was sort of new, and so it was a learning process. I will say though that since we did it all within sort of the iOS ecosystem, I think that probably made things a lot easier and streamlined things quite a bit. The game Treasure Hunt, which is like a word guessing game, much in the vein of Codenames, it relies on communication that happens between devices locally. That's very easy within when you're just operating within iOS, or when you're just operating within a single OS, right? So you could do similarly Android to Android or something like that. When you start working across platforms, it becomes a lot more challenging. And so I'd say, even though it was challenging in the sense that we were learning a bunch of stuff and everything was sort of new, we were sort of operating within one sort of cohesive ecosystem, which made, I think, the process a lot more smooth.
Right. Everything sort of had a solution that was very evident. You've how do I do this? Well, you're on iOS, you do X. Whereas now that we're developing for Android as well, we're running into situations where we have to kind of, okay, well, we have this many options. Each one has a pro and a con, and we have to kind of look at it through a different lens. So.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my next question, if you were actually developing for Android as well.
Yeah, we are in the thick of it.
So right now, you plan to release on Android as well. I'm sure there's challenges to that different that are on iOS, but are there, for the same game, will the iOS version be able to be played with the Android version, or at least is that your goal?
Yeah, Chris, you want to talk about this a bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that will very much be the case. So when we made the original game, we made it within sort of Xcode Swift, iOS's native development ecosystem. To port it to multiple platforms, we're redoing it in Unity, which comes obviously with the benefit of being able to deploy easily to multiple platforms. And then we're taking the sort of communication between devices aspect of it and just sort of ripping it out entirely. And we're sort of using third-party architecture to be able to communicate via a web server to these different devices, which will make it'll take the problem of compatibility between operating systems and sort of make it a moot point.
Okay. That kind of makes sense, because I was going to ask, because obviously I don't know if you guys have played the Jackbox games.
Oh yeah.
But just thinking about that, how they do everything through their website. So that kind of makes the website almost the middleman to shake hands with everybody else.
Yeah, that was our inspiration for the direction that we started going now, and working with multiple sort of operating systems. I think to Dan's point, everything sort of has pros and cons, and I think even this has trade-offs and drawbacks that we don't necessarily like, and I think we probably want to find solutions later on. Namely, you have to be sort of connected to the internet, and most of the time you are going to be, but there's going to be times when you're on road trips or in a park or camping or whatever, and there's just going to be times where your AT&T or your Verizon or whatever is just not connecting, especially in the States. In Japan, the Dan doesn't have that issue, but I have that issue quite a bit. So there's that component. There's also sort of complexity. There's cost. There are a number of cons that sort of also come with this architecture, this sort of way of doing the communication that we would like to find solves for.
That being said, I mean, it is very nice to have the option to do this, and it does work quite well. So I'm relatively happy that we've kind of arrived at this. I don't want to call it a compromise, but it's not, like Chris said, ideally what we wanted to do was just have iOS and Android devices all talking to each other without the need for internet. But in lieu of that, I think the solution that we found is pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It sounds like something that I'd want to check out actually, because I love playing the Jackbox games and stuff when I'm just socially with a group of people.
Oh.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we'll make sure you hear of it when we ship.
Yeah, definitely let me know because I do have an Android phone, so
okay.
So yeah, I'll definitely check it out once it's out on Android, and because I don't know what half the people I play games with what kind of device they have, so I think it's a mixture usually.
Yeah, it's nice to remove that worry, right, of having to kind of like guess what everyone's phone is before you boot up a game.
Yeah, that's the only downside of stuff that only comes to one platform. It's like, well, these people have iPhones, these people have Android phones, and usually in a group of friends it's about 50-50 generally.
Right.
So moving forward, where do you guys see, where do you guys want to go next past Treasure Hunt?
Yeah, I think the answer to this question probably has a few different components. One is probably there's probably the bigger picture of like sort of what we want Friendly Pixel to be as a company. I think that there's probably the more sort of immediate next steps of sort of continuing to create more sort of similar in tone, similar in complexities type party games to sort of complement Treasure Hunt. And so I'd say maybe for the latter one's probably maybe a little bit easier to talk about, where we have although we don't have too many details on it right now because we're still very exploration phase. But
right.
Yeah, effectively, if Treasure Hunt goes well and we think that there's a market for it, we would like to do sort of similar type experiences to what we have, to what we've already released.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure you guys have ideas. Obviously, I'm not gonna ask you to tell me what your ideas are, but but I'm sure you have ideas for what you're gonna do beyond. Is Treasure Hunt something that you'd consider bringing to other platforms too? Have you thought about that at all, like non-mobile platforms?
Yeah, kind of. We haven't really looked into it into too much detail, but Switch is actually something that we have kind of it's been recommended to us, and I think we're kind of interested in doing that because the Switch kind of has a kind of party game type,
for sure.
Not reputation, but like that's sort of generally speaking what people do on the Switch, right? So I think that's definitely probably where we might look next.
Yeah, I think in terms of like immediate platforms, that might be something that we sort of explore potentially. I think longer term, I think our sort of vision for party games are very much that yes, you will be playing our games on the Switch, you will be playing them on Apple TV, you will be playing, there's ways that you could potentially integrate all sorts of different types of peripherals. I think that there's a lot that you can do with party games with a sort of standard devices that are present in people's houses now. Um, and that the design space actually opens up probably quite a bit as a result of this sort of uh, proliferation of all these types of devices. So I think like longer term vision for the company, yes, we will want to explore different types of devices and see how they can sort of be integrated into the party game experience. But yeah, your term is very much probably Switch is the one after mobile.
Right. I guess that's kind of key, right? Is it's a matter of what sort of fits the experience that we want people to have when playing friendly pixel games, which is sort of people getting around, and a lot of that communication happening not between the devices, that is part of it, but the communication that really happens between people as they're playing the game. So one thing that made Treasure Hunt quite easy for us to develop is that most of the kind of communication is happening between the people who are holding their devices, which eliminates the need for us to kind of get, too bogged down in developing that. That kind of human to human connectivity is something that I think we really want to kind of foster and work toward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for what you guys are doing. So potentially, like Switch makes a lot of sense. It's definitely the one right now where I see people actually getting together to play, as opposed to the others where it's like, hey, let's play online. So
right.
Yeah, that's definitely, that seems like a logical next step, and yeah. So one question that I had while you guys were talking about that stuff, just thinking, because I haven't had anybody on that's worked on iOS, is as a company that are making games, how do you guys feel about Apple Arcade?
I really like it. I like the idea. For me, mobile games have been sort of a frustrating experience in that I think so many of them have just sort of ceased to be games in a lot of ways, where it's sort of like, okay, you boot up a game and you figure out how they're trying to get you to either spend gems or just it's kind of been removed from an actual enjoyable experience. Whereas Apple Arcade kind of removes that, and I think obviously we'll see where it goes, but so far I'm liking where it's going, how it's bringing just kind of just objective gameplay back into the games that you download from the App Store.
Yeah, to echo Dan's sentiment there, I think it's going to be these sort of subscription game-like services. And Microsoft has one with Game Pass. I think hopefully they're going to be really good for the games industry, game developers in general, because those developers can now think about, well, how do I make a game fun and enjoyable, and not, to Dan's point, like, how do I try to trick a person into playing,
right.
and then start spending gems when they realize they can't, or they start not progressing really at all, unless they spend money. I when it first came out, I gave a few games a try, found some that I liked, found some that I didn't like. I honestly haven't really been back to it much recently, but I'll definitely periodically check back as it releases more content.
Yeah, that's actually where I'm sitting right now. Is I tried a few out on my iPad when it first came out, and I haven't really gone back to it too much. But yeah, there's some great stuff on there, and yeah, your point of, hey, these are games that are thinking more about fun than trying to bleed you for money. I think that's definitely a good step forward for mobile games, because I think that's definitely to their detriment.
Yeah, it's a shame that mobile games is kind of synonymous with, like, I don't know, just kind of scumminess.
Yeah,
for lack of a better word.
Yeah, because I don't think, obviously there's going to be some predatory developers out there that are like, yes, give me all your money, but I think a vast majority of them just want to make a good game, but also want to keep putting food on the table too. So
yeah,
so that makes a lot of sense. So guys, as we wrap up here, what advice would you give to somebody else that want to get into making games for mobile games or just anything?
Oof, I don't really feel like I'm in the position to give advice yet, but
Yeah, I feel like come back in maybe a year, hopefully,
Yeah.
and ask for advice or something. But I don't know. I mean, I can speak to maybe some of the things that sort of surprised me, especially as coming from somebody within the established gaming industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going from sort of the established game industry to what is frankly sort of independent development. Um, like I would say that the stuff that you learn in the established sort of gaming studio world is quite a bit different than the skills that are sort of required as a sort of an indie developer when you're sort of in sort of the established world. And I think this is true whether you're in the games industry or whether you're in the software industry. When you're at a big company, you do something very, very, very specialized. You're hired to be an expert on that thing. When you go to indie development and you're with just a few people, you need to be able to do a lot of things. And what comes with that, and sort of what I've been trying to learn is how, as I'm learning how to do something, how do I learn just enough to do that thing and not spend a minute of more time on it, right? Because it's also very possible that you can, to learn the thing that you need to do in order to ship your product, you start going down a rabbit hole on that thing, and I've had to catch myself a few times. I'll be reading books. I'm like, how much do I really need to know about server client architecture in order to make a sort of stand up a simple Node.js server where people can come into a room, get a code, join that room, and sort of play the game. So I guess if I could sort of summarize the piece of advice is you have to know a lot of stuff, be very quick and how you learn it, and don't do deep learning.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that point, there's also the idea of the amount of free resources there are out there and really taking advantage of that, and not spending too much time. Because sometimes, depending on how much money your time is worth, it really isn't a great idea to go too deep, like Chris was saying, and just sort of do what you need to do, and also keep your eyes open for. It's very possible that someone's already done the work for you. And knowing where to find the, using Stack Overflow. Top piece of advice right there.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being on today. For anybody that's curious about Friendly Pixel and the games you're working on, where can they find you?
Friendlypixel.app is our website. We're also on Facebook, and we have like a non-functioning Instagram account. But yeah, we're in the App Store. The game is Treasure Hunt. Treasure Hunt word game will put us up at the top. Sometimes we're ranked a bit low if you just search Treasure Hunt. But yeah, please check us out and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Christian, Daniel, thank you guys so much for being on. I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast this week.
Thanks, Trevor.
Great. Yeah, thanks for Trevor. It was great talking with you.
And thanks to everybody out there for listening. We'll be back next week.